Imagine lying awake at 3 in the morning, worrying about every possible financial disaster that could happen tomorrow. Your car breaks down, your laptop dies, or maybe you suddenly lose your job, completely out of nowhere. There's a specific dollar amount that could eliminate most of those sleepless nights and anxiety for good. Most people think financial milestones are just arbitrary numbers that rich people made up to feel superior. But there's real psychology and mathematics behind why certain amounts change everything about your life in powerful ways. That first game changer isn't $1 million or even $100,000, it's just $10,000. I'm Neo, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, psychology, and why some people thrive financially. You know that grocery store moment when you're mentally calculating if you can afford the name brand, cereal, or not. This is reality for millions living paycheck to paycheck, constantly stressed about every single financial decision they make. Every decision becomes a careful calculation, and every unexpected expense feels like a potential catastrophe to your finances. You're constantly playing defense with your money instead of making proactive choices about your actual future and goals. But something absolutely fascinating happens when you finally hit that magical $10,000 mark in your savings. It's not about buying expensive things. Most people who reach this milestone don't actually change their spending habits much. Your relationship with risk shifts completely when you've finally got some real savings sitting behind you safely. With zero savings, every single decision feels dangerous and potentially financially devastating to you and your entire family. But when you have $10,000 sitting there, those same decisions suddenly feel totally manageable and less scary. You might finally ask for that promotion or invest in a course that could significantly boost your earning potential over time. There's something fascinating that happens to your brain chemistry when you see that 5-figure balance in your account. Neuroscientists have found that financial security reduces cortisol levels, which is your body's primary stress hormone, significantly affecting life. Think about the last time you had a minor car problem and that check engine light came on. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, that light might as well be a countdown timer to complete financial disaster. But when you have $10,000 saved up, that same check engine light becomes just a simple, annoying inconvenience. This shift from complete panic to mild annoyance might seem small, but it has ripple effects throughout your life. When you're not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions in general about everything else in life. You sleep better at night, you're more productive at work, and you're more patient with your family and friends. Financial stress affects every single aspect of human behavior. And removing that stress unlocks mental energy for improving situations. But here's something that most people don't realize about the $10,000 milestone and how it works. The majority of the benefit doesn't come from spending the money. It comes from knowing the money is there. This is what financial experts call the emergency fund effect, and it's one of the most underrated concepts. Most people who build up $10,000 in savings never actually spend it on emergencies, which might surprise you. Instead, they spend it on opportunities like education, starting businesses, moving to better locations, or having mental bandwidth. There's also a confidence factor that's hard to quantify but absolutely impossible to ignore once you experience it. When you know you have money in the bank, you carry yourself completely differently in every interaction and negotiation. You negotiate better deals. You're more willing to walk away from bad situations because you're not desperate or afraid. This confidence often leads to better job opportunities, better relationships, and better life outcomes in general for people. The hardest part isn't actually saving the money itself. It's developing the identity of someone who saves consistently. Most people approach saving like it's a temporary diet. They cut expenses dramatically for months, then burn out completely. But the people who successfully reach $10,000 don't think of saving as temporary sacrifice. They become different people. This identity shift is absolutely crucial because it affects every single financial decision you make going forward in life. When you see yourself as someone who saves money, you start noticing opportunities to reduce expenses everywhere around you. You become more creative about finding additional income sources, and you start thinking long-term, instead of focusing on gratification. The beautiful thing about this process is that it genuinely gets easier as you go along with building. Saving your first $1,000 is brutal and requires significant lifestyle changes and constant willpower to stick with new habits. But saving your second $1,000 is noticeably easier because you've already developed the habits and the proper mindset for success. By the time you're working toward your fifth or $6,000, the process feels almost automatic and effortless. This amount of money can cover most unexpected expenses that derail people financially, like car repairs or medical bills. Most situations can be handled with less than $10,000, which means you're effectively immune to disaster. But perhaps the most significant change is how you start thinking about money instead of asking if you can. You shift to asking whether something is worth it, and that subtle change transforms your relationship with spending and saving. You stop seeing money as something that controls you and start controlling it, which is a fundamental shift. Let's talk about something called decision fatigue, which sounds like corporate buzzword nonsense, but is actually a real phenomenon. Every day you make thousands of tiny financial decisions about generic or name brand, lunch or sandwich, premium gas. Each of these micro decisions burns mental energy. And by day's end, you're exhausted from calculating affordability constantly. But when you have 10,000 saved, 90% of these daily financial decisions become completely irrelevant to life. You're not choosing between generic and name brand pasta because you're worried about your bank account balance anymore. Imagine how much mental energy you'd free up if you stopped making survival-based calculations 50 times per day. Someone told me they almost cried in a grocery store after hitting 10,000, not because they bought caviar, but because they realized they could focus on what they actually wanted to eat instead of what they could afford. That's a level of freedom most people don't realize they're missing until they experience it for themselves. Having 10,000 saved doesn't make you rich and doesn't mean you can quit your job to become a juggler, but it gives you breathing room, and breathing room is the foundation of every single good financial decision. When you're not gasping for financial air, you can actually think strategically about your money instead of reacting. You notice your car insurance renewal coming up and actually shop around for better rates instead of accepting it. You realize your phone plan is ridiculously expensive and switch to something cheaper without worrying about the switching fees. These optimizations might only save you $50 or $100 per month, but they compound over time into savings. When you have zero savings, every dollar feels precious because losing it means you're one step closer to disaster. But when you have 10,000 saved, individual dollars start feeling less precious, which actually makes you willing to invest. The person with no savings might skip a $50 networking event because 50 feels like a lot. The person with 10,000 saved might attend that same event and meet someone who offers them 5,000 more. The safety net doesn't make you careless with money, but it makes you willing to invest in opportunities that pay off. I've seen this play out countless times with people who build their first substantial savings account in their lives. They often experience a sudden acceleration in their career growth, not because having money directly leads to promotions, but because financial security gives them the confidence to take chances that broke people simply can't afford to take. When you're constantly stressed about your financial situation, it affects how you interact with other people in subtle ways. You might avoid social situations because you can't afford to participate, or feel embarrassed about your struggles and withdraw. But when you have 10,000 saved, these social dynamics completely transform in ways you probably never expected to experience. You can say yes to reasonable social invitations without anxiety, and you're more generous because treats won't derail finances. Your relationships improve because money stress is cited as one of the primary causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're not constantly worried about bills, you have more emotional energy to invest in the people you care about. You're less irritable, less anxious, and more present in your interactions with others, which strengthens all your relationships. You walk into job interviews differently when you know you don't desperately need the position just to survive another month. You're more likely to negotiate salary and benefits because you're not operating from a place of fear or desperation. This confidence often results in better job offers and higher compensation, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates progress. 10,000 might sound enormous if you're living paycheck to paycheck, but you don't need to save it all at once. The most successful savers started with ridiculously small amounts, maybe 50 per month, maybe even just $25. The key is consistency over time, not the size of your initial contribution to your savings account each month. Americans spend over $3,000 yearly on coffee and dining out, not even counting major expenses like car payments. If you could redirect just 1/3 of that spending towards savings, you'd have your 10,000 in 3 years. The difference between someone who builds savings and someone who doesn't comes down to awareness and intentionality, not income. The transformation that happens when you save your first 10,000 isn't just about the money itself in your account. It's about becoming the type of person who has money saved, and that identity shift creates ripple effects everywhere. So there you have it. 10,000 isn't just a number. It's a complete psychological transformation touching every aspect. From sleeping better at night to walking into interviews with actual confidence instead of desperation. This milestone changes everything. If you're currently staring at a bank balance that looks pathetically small right now, don't panic about it. Start small, stay consistent, and remember that the person you become while saving your first 10,000 is invaluable.